Hello YouTube. So today we're back at one of the 3D printers. This is the Monoprice MakerSelect. It's slightly disassembled right now because, well, I mentioned a long time ago that I wanted to install BLTouch sensors on these printers, and to do that you need to flash a custom firmware. So I figured, well, before I install the actual sensor, I would like to try to run the actual firmware first. The firmware is called ADVi3pp. I'll leave a link to it down in the description. But to flash these things, they are a little bit different than a lot of other 3D printers in that they have two boards in them. They have the touch screen in the front and then the control board in the back. And the touch screen in the front is not actually controlled by the main board in here. This thing, the control board in the front here, just lift it up slightly. You can see that is actually the screen. The control board in the front there runs its own firmware, and it's basically just a series of images, all the stuff you see on the screen that you could press. And depending on what button you press, a command gets sent to the main board back in the printer. So you need to flash two firmwares, one for the touchscreen and one for the control board in here, for this to work. Now the main board you can flash via USB. I have a USB cable over here that's hooked up to Octoprint, and we're going to attempt flashing it through Octoprint. That should be possible. So we have a look at that a little bit later, but first we'll need to flash the control panel. Also, we can't actually see if anything's working afterwards, and well, the flashing process for the screen has some visual elements to it, so it makes sense to do that first. You can see if that goes through. To get to this, you'll need to loosen 4 screws first of all. There's the 2 grub screws on top up here that is holding the rails. You need to loosen those so the front panel can slide off. Then there's 2 larger screws in these locations that you need to take out completely, and then you can take the front panel off. Now when you get inside, I haven't actually seen that before. I don't know if this is a new edition or if it's always like this, but there's a shield on this, a cover that sits like this. Now on these Monoprice printers, there's actually, I don't know if I can show you this because I have disconnected the ribbon cable over here and don't want to damage that. So just see if we can maybe get a look at that. You see there's a slot down here. That's actually for the SD card. So you could get in there without removing this shield. There's just 4 screws holding it in. But I just find, well, I'll need some tweezers, something to get it's a micro SD card in there. So I figured, let's just remove the shield. But now that the shield is removed, you just gotta be aware that you've got an exposed circuit board here, and everything around it is metal. So just be careful with that. And actually what I think I am going to do is just put a couple of these screws back in so that it's actually connected to this panel and not sliding around so much. If I can find the right size to do that. So just put in one in diagonal corners so it's fairly secure. It can still move a bit there, you can see, but shouldn't be too bad. Then we'll have it a little bit under control and it won't be quite as suspect. If I can find the hole down here, I can't see shit, to be honest, down in that corner. Just doesn't feel like I'm actually hitting the right spot. At least it doesn't feel like it's gripping anything. Okay, so actually getting this lined up is a bit more tricky than I would have thought. Well, you just do the two top corners then. It should still be somewhat secure. Okay, so now we're actually ready. I'll just power it through the USB cable, because the USB cable actually provides power for both the mainboard and the control panel in front here. But, well, obviously you won't have enough power to actually run the heated bed and the steppers and all that. But the actual circuitry, the control boards, you can actually run just through USB power. So the next step is going to the computer and preparing a micro SD card for this, so we can flash the control or the touchscreen. So to the computer. Okay, so here we are at the computer, and excuse me if I sound a little bit different. I'm using a different mic here. But we want to go to this address, which I'll leave down in the description. The home of the GitHub of the ADVi3pp Marlin firmware. So it's based on Marlin, but you can't just flash normal Marlin on this printer. You'll need to use this. So we want to go to releases, like I just did. I'm going to find this latest and greatest release. Now note this is only compatible with the Duplicator i3 Plus version 1 and clones such as the MakerSelect Plus, and there's a Cocoon Create and a few others, Powerspec. But the version 2, or the Wanhao Duplicator i3 Plus Mark II, which has a built-in, you know the difference by it having a auto bed level sensor, which the Mark I or version 1 does not. So that's the easy way to tell the difference. That's not supported yet. They say they will in a future release. We'll see, but I don't have a Mark II, so I'll just go down here. And note, you'll need to upgrade both mainboard and firmware. The versions has to match. And then there's a user manual, which I'll also link, which I'm following on a second screen. The first thing we need to do is to download the appropriate files down here. So we need the LCD image file for flashing the LCD, as far as I remember. And for the other one, I think we just want the hex file. I don't want the BLTouch version, because I haven't actually installed the BLTouch sensor yet. So I'll be reflashing it soon with this version, but we'll start with the mainboard version. And let me just double check the manual here. To flash the what's it called? The LCD screen. I'm on Windows, so I'll use a program called Etcher. We just need to unzip. We'll take that image, which should be on my C drive, all the way down there. We'll check the device. Now, one thing to note here is you should not use an SD card or micro SD card larger than 8 GB. Apparently, there's some issues there where the little control board, the touch panel board, can't actually read those correctly. I have no idea why that is. Luckily, I found a 4 GB one. I think I have plenty of what is it? Normal sized SD cards that's this small, but actually most of my micro SD cards are like 16 GB or larger. So luckily I found one. I think it came with my DSLR camera. So we'll just press flash. Windows will black the screen and ask me if I really want to do this, and off we go. Okay, so that's an issue. The flash failed. I'll just retry it. It does look... Well, when I look at my other screen, I'll see here, it does look like it has been flashed correctly. So I'm not sure what that was all about. What we could do here is try and downloading the zip instead and just have a look if that's the same files that's in there, if it looks correct. Yeah, that looks pretty much the same. So I won't bother you with this, but I'll just try reflashing it one more time just to make sure, and then we'll see if we can install it in the actual printer. The flash project failed again, but it looks like the files are on there, so I think I'm just gonna risk it. So we insert the SD card down here. Let's see if that's the right side up. That's correct. And we want to see the screen as it runs, because we should see some flashing, some images going across the screen and stuff. So just see if we can get that mounted up there. And it should auto flash when we apply power here. Yes, we get a blue screen. That's an indication that it's found the files that we are supposed to flash. I have no idea how long this process takes, but what happens is it loads each image one by one, as we see here. So we're just gonna wait, maybe have a little bit of beer. And wait for this process to finish. And if this takes more than 10 seconds more, I'll just speed it up in production or editing. The one idea I got about this is just a series of images. So you could pretty easily put in like your own logos and stuff. So I can make a snake tail logo that goes instead of that Marlin logo there. That could be cool. So I might look into that, because it's basically just, I think, a bitmap image that you'll have to replace. Now, if this means that it's done or what, I'm not actually sure. But it doesn't look like anything more is happening. We'll just give it, I would kind of expect it to reboot or something, but yeah, and we can't really test out because I don't think that without the mainboard, we haven't flashed that yet, so I don't think anything would actually work here. So yeah, let's just try, see if we can press something. It does seem to be responsive, so I think it's done. That's pretty easy. So we'll cut the power. We'll remove our SD card. And I'm probably going to lose that because now I'll put it at a spot where I can actually see it right now. And basically we just need to reassemble this. I'll show you that since I didn't show you me disassembling it. So let me just show you how it goes back together. I'll remove these screws that I put in to hold the screen. And the back cover goes on. There's slots in each end. And one of them matches up with the cable, so we'll make sure you put it the right way around. And then I just need to insert these screws. Actually finding the spot where they're supposed to thread into, that's actually a little bit tricky. I think that one got it. But it's not really keyed in any way. It doesn't auto align up, so you have to kind of feel around a little bit to figure that out. It looks like we got those two, then the last two should be aligned up. Now, so I'll just drop those in there. Tighten everything up. I mean, this doesn't have to be super tight, but well, it is a 3D printer, it shakes around and stuff, so I'll give them a little bit of torque just to make sure they stay in there. We don't want those rattling around inside. And I know my hands are in the way here, but the camera's really close to what I'm actually doing here. So I'm trying my best. Got those screws in there, and if I can get this to actually catch, I'll just give it 1/10 of a turn extra to make sure it's in there. Then this, right now I've propped this up with just a hammer. The shaft or a hammer is under there. Otherwise, when I pulled this off, the whole thing will just crash down, and because this is actually the feet. So just to keep that from happening, I put in a, like I said, like a hammer there. Make sure that the ribbon cable actually goes inside. There's a slot down here that it can come out of. So we want it actually inside the printer. We'll line it up. We'll line up the bed here. And then we should be able to get these to go into these slots up here, which you can't really see, but these mounts here has a hole that the rails here can go into. Actually lining this up is not quite as easy as I would have expected, especially since I can't see what's going on the other side. Got one side in, but that popped out again. God damn it. I can feel it, really. There we go. So now that's in, let's get these big screws on to keep that tight. No! Okay. I'm just gonna move around to the other side of the camera here, over here, so I can see what is going on back here. That's one side in, that's both sides in. Hopefully we can get this to find its hole here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. So that's holding on. We'll do this side. There. Then we just need to tighten everything up. So we'll do that and that and these grub screws up here. Keep those in place. We'll reconnect the USB so that Octoprint can get a connection, and then we'll try to see if we can flash the mainboard inside through Octoprint. I've never tried this before with any 3D printer flashing it through Octoprint, so this will be a first for me, but the manual says it can be done. So let's try it. So, back at the computer, and this is how my Octoprint often looks. I quite rarely actually run updates. If it works, then fine. I don't want to mess around with updates. The profile is a Wanhao, but it's not actually. It's it should be my MakerSelect. I just copied the stuff from the other printer. So to do a firmware update through Octoprint, we need to go to the plugin manager, and where's that? Firmware detection, plugin manager down here. We've installed some various stuff. Want to get more? So what we want is the firmware updater plugin. So let's just search for firmware updater. Flash pre-compiled firmware images. So if you want to build this yourself, you'll need to build it somewhere else and get a bin file or something, or hex file, before you can use this. We'll install that. It shouldn't take long, I hope. I doubt it's a very large library, but we'll see. Successfully installed. And then we need to restart. So it's kind of like Windows, although only the Octoprint server, not the whole system, it seems. There we go, that took a while. Anyway, that's installed. So we should have a new option in here somewhere. We have firmware updater down here, so you go to the settings tab and all the way to the bottom. We have firmware updater. We want to, that's the only device that we can flash to, so we'll use that. We want to flash from a file. I've downloaded that. I just need to unpackage it. I don't think I did that before. So, oh, it's not actually packaged. Get it. I'll just throw that down on the C drive so I don't have to search around for it. There we go. So we go to C drive, and down to the bottom we should have this hex file. And now it's just a matter of pressing this button and hoping that we don't break our mainboard. The flash method is not selected. I do not understand. Flash method? Oh. So we need to select something here. I think it's ADVi3pp. Let me just double check the manual for this. Firmware updater. Flash metal, yeah. ADVi3pp should be the proper one. That should be an ADVi3pp 2560. We need to path to ADVi3pp. Wait, do I need to install a second plugin? Or do I just need to type it in? It doesn't say anything about installing it, so let's just try typing in this path that they have in the manual. It might have been installed with the firmware updater thing. Test. The path does not exist. Oh, so we need to install
Oh, okay, so, well, that's good, then you know. I skipped the part. We need to SSH into the Pi and install this manually. You can't actually do it through Octoprint. So I'll just get a connection going here and show you how to do that. Yeah, it's just log in as, is it Pi? So we need to SSH in. I'm using PuTTY, and then we need to run a few commands here. We need to run sudo apt get or updates to make sure we have the latest packages. Then we need to do sudo apt install ADVi3pp. Use some disk space, that's fine. So we say yes. There we go, that should be it. So if we go back here, say ADVi3pp, that make 25 60, not 50, user bin ADVi3pp. And now we have ADVi3pp installed. The programmer type should be wiring. Necessary. So we've got that. Starting flash, and then we just wait. So it says flashing successful, which means that, let's just close this. If we connect here, well, we do get a connection, get some readings. So it does at least seem to be up and running. So let's go back to the actual printer and see if we can controlling it using the new interface.
So back up and running, we are greeted with this message. The settings stored in EEPROM are not compatible with this version of the firmware. For this reason, the settings have been reset and you have to enter manual settings or redo the tuning. Okay, so I looked this up in the manual. What we need to do is go into the tuning manual, and then we can tune basically the E-steps for the extruder, the motors. We do pit tuning, etc., etc. And actually it all comes with these quite a nice pictures to show you what to do. So I won't go through that process. It should be fairly straightforward, but it's pretty nice that they actually include this in the firmware. Usually this is a manual process. Well, it's still manual, but usually you have to figure this stuff out yourself, then input the commands via serial, let's say through Octoprint or something else to adjust these settings in the EEPROM. I'm just gonna hope that it's not too far off, that the default settings is decent enough. Then we'll do maybe a calibration video some other day. I've promised that before as well, but let's just have a look at this firmware. So first of all, we have the extruder. We have some numbers up here. We have the extruder first. It says it's 18 degrees. It's set to 0. That's probably about right for my room right now. But it says the bed is 9 degrees and set at 0. That's because I have a problem with the thermistor in this bed. Now this is actually still under warranty, so I could send it back, but in reality it's probably a bad connection of some sort, because the thermistor kind of cuts out sometimes gives wrong readings. So it's probably a bad solder joint, a bad connection, something like that somewhere. So I figure once I take it apart to install, I need to get the soldering iron out anyway to install the BLTouch sensor. So I figured that should be like a 5-minute fix. Maybe a new thermistor probably has some laying around. Maybe I'll have to order a part, but we'll see. But that's like a 5-cent part anyway. So yeah, I don't want to bother with actually returning this, you know, have to ship it back to Amazon, and it'll be weeks before I have it back. And yeah, that's just really annoying. Then we have the fan speed, that's for the part cooling. That's not doing anything right now. I can see we've got, yeah, we can go into this menu and get some grasp of the temperatures and stuff. Then we've got the C, that's at 0. I'm not sure what that does, what that means actually. Once we start using the firmware, we can maybe figure it out. Then we've got some various settings down here. Let's start from this side because I feel like it. We've got some statistics, so it shows how many prints we have and how many we've completed, print time, total filament extruded. That's cool. Doesn't really matter, but that's cool to have that kind of statistics. We've got the versions that we're running, 3.0.2 for the mainboard and the CD. We've got some firmware, that's, yeah, it's nice. Copyright, this is a fork of Marlin firmware based on work by Silver Quark, DP, Sourshot M6 and Wanhao, yada yada yada. It's nice. Got a sponsor page where that a link to a Patreon page. So if you want to support this product, you can go there. Just it's down here at the bottom. ADVi3pp. Yes. We've got a settings page. Let's have a look at that. And I'm hoping this is still in focus because my camera is struggling to focus on this screen. So we've got some settings here for motors. Steps, let's see, we can do, that's maybe the thing we were talking about adjusting with that tuning menu. Looks like you can just punch in numbers directly rather than running the guide. Feed rates, so we can set the max feed rates. We can set the max acceleration rates. We can set the max jerk rates. That's nice. Let's see, we can do a pit tune or manual input pit. We can do thermal baud rate and thermal protection. Does that mean the thermal? That's a bit weird because it looks like thermal protection is active now, and that it should be because that's the default. But usually when you have a slider like that, I would think that that position would be on to the right and to the left would be off. Or am I just remembering wrong? But that's what my intuition tells me. Then we have sensors. That's for the BLTouch sensor. So we need to install the other firmware, but they didn't remove it from this menu, and that's probably because they only want to do one version of the mainboard firmware and not two versions of the LCD or the other way around. They'll have to do two versions of the mainboard firmware to support the sensor, but they don't want to do an extra version of the LCD firmware if they can avoid it. So they've included the buttons, but you can't use any of them. And then we've got LCD. We can do some screen dimming and brightness settings. Beep when waiting on action, beep on press. That's nice because you didn't have any of these settings in the old Wanhao or Monoprice firmware. So that's actually pretty nice to include that. And we have the tuning menu. You can tune a bunch of stuff, which we'll get back to maybe in a later video. We've got a print menu where we can go into the SD card and load whatever we want. And we've got a control menu where we've got, well, this is basically the same as in the Wanhao. Maybe it's organized a bit different, but you can load and unload filament. You can preheat the whole system. You can tell it to cool down. If it's heated, you stop the print and then turn off the heating. You can go in here and tell it to do that. You can disable the drive so you can move stuff around manually. Right now the drives aren't actually enabled because I haven't moved anything since I turned it on. We can go into the movie menu, and this is the big one. Does it actually work? And it does seem like it do. Well, except right now, that's maybe the C stuff in the menu. It actually remembers where C is. That's actually pretty nice. So it's okay. It's only based on what's it called? On software. There's no sensor other than the limit switch to reset it, but it will tell you what C height you're at roughly. So we can home all, move around. So I think there's really only one thing left to do. That is load some filaments, if I can. So let's, and then do a test print. So I'm thinking good old Benchy, right? So this must be the unload icon. So now it'll heat and I can extract the old filament, load some new one, and we'll see. Now I haven't done any calibration on anything, so this and I'm thinking I'm using an old open rule of PLA that's or spool of PLA that's got quite a bit of moisture in it, so it's not really a test of the quality of this firmware or anything. It's just a test to see if it actually works or not. Then we can start dialing in afterwards. So yeah, I'll get that set up, clean up the bed. I can see there's an old skirt on there that I hadn't removed. And then we'll have a look at how the Benchy turned out at the end of this video. Okay, so I didn't actually finish the Benchy. I could see it starting lifting slightly from the bed in the front. And that's one of the problems when you're running with no heated bed. It is possible to get adhesion, especially with like a BLTouch like material, like these Wanhao and clone printers usually come with. But you have to be super accurate with the bed leveling to get good adhesion. So I decided to just cancel the print. We can have a look at it anyways. I mean, it looks like, yeah, on the bottom, it's either, let's see if we can get some focus on this. You might be able to see there's some, either it's under extrusion or it wasn't close enough to the bed. I just level it very quickly by eye, so there's no big surprise. But other than that, I mean, it looks like the bottom of a Benchy at least. It looks the part, so I'd say the firmware seems to be working as it's intended. So now we just need to well, get that BLTouch sensor installed. I have it here somewhere. I might actually have it right here. No, that wasn't it. No, unfortunately no, but yeah, right here. So we get the BLTouch sensor installed. Maybe in the next video, we'll see. But we have it in this package right here. Just get it out so we can see what the sensor itself looks like. It's in there. Let's see if we can get it out of this package. Oh, it goes the other way. Yeah, it looks like this on the mount. There's a few different mounts that you can 3D print to do this. So where exactly I'll put it, I don't know. You could put it right here next to this. You can put it in the back, but yeah, I'll figure that out. So that'll be the next videos. Then I'll have to reflash the mainboard firmware. But anyway, that was a quick look at the ADVi3p firmware for Wanhao, MakerSelect, Cocoon Create, etc., clone printers. And as you can see, we have this graph down here. You can see that's a nice addition at least, and there's some help for calibrating the printer in the firmware, so you don't have to do it manually via a serial console to input all the values. That's very nice. All in all, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with this new firmware, and I'll definitely be ready to or want to upgrade the to the BLTouch sensor now that I know the firmware is good. The problem is you can't run that sensor on the stock firmware. You need to do this firmware upgrade to make it work. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was actually a viable product. So we'll do that in the future, install the BLTouch sensor and reflash the firmware and test that out. Maybe even play around with like replacing some of these logos. There's various places. At least the boot screen, you could you know, add your own logo instead of the that Marlin logo thing that's in here. So that could be fun to play around with. Anyways, that's it for now. So until next time, take care.